Hi, welcome back. Or if you're new here, my name is Amanda Ray. This video is going to be on my cult that I came from, the Order history. I'm going to do a little recap just because I feel like there's been a lot of newcomers coming to my channel. So, hi. I was born and raised in a polygamous cult known as the Order. My dad has 3 wives. The third wife is his own half-sister. I have 8 half-siblings who are the product of my dad marrying his own half-sister. There's a lot of polygamous groups in Utah. But what sets mine apart is they boink their sisters. No, they do that. They do that. But there's a lot of things that they do differently, and there's a lot of history on this group that I like to expose. This video in particular is going to be talking about Order history. You can Google the Kingston clan, the Order, the DCC Society, Davis County Cooperative Society, whatever. And yes, you'll see like, oh, the leader's brother Paul, he has 27 wives, over 300 kids, but you're not going to be able to really know the Order history unless you talk to someone from the Order, whereas they're not going to talk. We're brought up our entire lives to not share the Lord's secrets, right? Don't cast pearls before swine. There's all these verses that they would tell us to get us to not tell outsiders about what's going on inside this cult. But I don't give a shit. Because I am doing my channel and I am talking and exposing the group for what it is, I am worse off in their eyes. Like, I'm worse than going to hell. Like, I am like worshiping the devil because I chose to expose them, to expose the Lord's secrets. But this is actually a part 2. And this has been a long time coming, but you guys remember in the part 1 was really hard for me to edit. I was crying in the beginning. So I actually sent this video to an editor, and it was a lot easier to do it that way, but it's been in the works for a while. So we're finally having the part 2, but this video we're exposing a little more of what happened back in the day before I was even born in the cult. So we do have some information, and they will be having their voice morphed, but they are an informant that's giving us a lot of information on some things that happened with the leadership, and with the leadership suing their own followers, and some things that happened in to make place for the 10% form. And I'm going to explain the 10% form for new members, new cult members, new people coming to my channel. When I was growing up in this cult, we were required to sign what's called a 10% form. And that meant 10% of everything that you have goes to the Lord, right? The leadership. But you also have to remember, the Kingstons are known for, they have their own bank, they have their own everything. They have lawyers, they're very sustained, like self-sustained, is that the word? But we were all supposed to be putting our money into the Order bank, and then because we signed this 10% form every year, that allowed them to take 10% of everything that we put into the bank. And we didn't really have a choice. I mean, me as a child, I was a minor, I was just signing this paperwork, right? But I never knew the history of why they started the 10% forms until now. So I wanted to share this history to outsiders and Order members, and we will be talking a lot about the 10% form and inventory form. And again, for outsiders who don't know what an inventory form is, as if the 10% form wasn't enough, but we were always taught every year to sign the inventory form. What an inventory form is we have to write down everything that we own that is of value and sign it away to the church. So technically the church could use it if they wanted to. This also progressed into people not owning their own homes, the leadership being in charge of properties, blah, 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 blah. But I really wanted you guys to see and hear this firsthand so that you could kind of get a better understanding of how this cult has evolved into what it is today. So I really hope that this video is explaining it in a way where outsiders and insiders can understand. If not, please leave a comment in the comment section down below with the questions, and I'll try to answer your questions as clear as possible. Sometimes I watch my videos back and I'm like, oh yeah, I can understand what I'm saying, but I could totally see how that got interpreted differently with other people. So please ask for clarification if anyone is confused, but I feel like I spelled it out pretty well in this, but let me know in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoy. See you at the end of the video.
Well, if he got in that courtroom and everything was exposed, and notaries on forged documents and all this different things, he was going to be in a lot worse trouble, and he knew it.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Amanda Ray, and I left a polygamous cult when I was 17, almost 18 years old. If you're interested in hearing about that, I'll leave the links to my story in the description box down below. But today we are doing a part 2 to the question that we actually didn't answer in part 1, but it is, why did Paul Kingston sue his own followers? We have our informant here today. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll leave it in the description box down below. Paul Kingston, the leader of the order, the polygamous group that I was born in, there ended up being a property dispute, and it ended in Paul trying to sue his own followers. Do you want to kind of give a little recap of it?
Yeah, part 1 was about a property dispute. The owner had she was listed as a president. She had her name removed without signing anything. It was put into somebody else's name. And so that upset her, and so the dispute started there. And then they went back and forth for the better part of a year. And then the demand was made that Paul put it in their names, and if they choose to consecrate it, they can do that. But you shouldn't be taking her name off of things and then not giving her the choice.
It's a whole swath of just shady stuff that happened, including having a notary. There was a notary that was basically fake notary, right, that was happening. Just a lot of shady stuff just so that Paul could have this property. And the reason why this story is so important, I mean, there's multiple reasons, but I think one of the biggest things is this is ultimately what brought the 10% form.
Correct.
So I'm going to show a picture of the 10% form just to show any newcomers or anyone who even for members, because I didn't even read the 10% form till I left. I was like, wow, I'm signing this. And it literally says things in there like, basically, if you sign it, you owe them money, and if you cancel it, you owe them money. But the reason why this came out was because of this huge dispute with property.
Yeah. Now, just a little point of clarification. The 10% was it's biblical and tithing and such. And so people paid that before, but these documents, they had to make it legal. This is when it became a legal document that the members signed, making them forfeit the 10%. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because basically they didn't want to run into any issues like this again. So, I mean, to me, I'm like, I don't know if that could even hold up in court, but I really think that it scares the members into, we don't.
Yeah.
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 I like his comparison though, because tithing's supposed to be when someone's willingly kind of giving it to them, but it's all up to them. But the order's turning it to where now it's more of a forceful thing.
My question is, they already had inventory forms though.
Yeah. But this made it legal. Before it was a voluntary thing. Anything you put on your inventory, they didn't come through your house and see if everything was correct. It was on the honor system. You would put things on your inventory, and then you would give it up, like the memory gem. But this made things legal. And so anything on your inventory list now is legally theirs because you just signed it over. And this is only for litigation reasons, really, because they hadn't had this happen really up until that point. And then when you lose a big chunk of property like that that's worth millions of dollars, you got to change up your game so it doesn't happen again. And so these legal documents came about because of that.
Wow. It was their way of just covering them to be able to get anything that they could get.
Covering the bases, yeah.
Eskel had a good point. I'm going to try to word it, but I might just have you say it again. But basically how, and we've talked about this in part 1 too, but it's so funny how, I mean, it's not really funny, but the order will say, what your work and your inventory, your 10%, all of your money, all of everything is the Lord's. It's Heavenly Father's. It's the order's. But then it's when it's debt, it's not the Lord's.
I feel like it is still funny because a lot of order members believe it and they interpret it, and they know that when they are consecrated, everything they make, everything that they have consecrated, it's the Lord. It's for the kingdom of God. So if that's the case, then that should also include your debt. So when you're going into debt, when you're spending that money, you know that that's the Lord's debt too then, if that's what you're going by.
I did an episode with Michelle where she talked about how her dad, Jesse, had a wife die and the wife was in debt, and he was trying to figure out, should we distribute this debt onto the kids? But isn't it ironic? It's funny. I keep saying funny, but it's not funny. But Jesse's over here trying to distribute that debt onto the kids, but Jesse's over here a numbered man who's the dad. Why isn't the debt going on him? So it's just interesting how they view debt and how they view the surplus as always Paul and his brothers, but any debt is not their responsibility. So we have the 10% forms are born after this whole issue happens, but we never actually talked about how it came to be, where there was actual paperwork that was filed. There was a lawsuit.
Paul put everything back because I I'm pretty sure he knew he was going to lose because of the notary discrepancies and taking somebody's name off and just basically stealing this huge piece of property.
Well, this is what I think, but I'm going to ask what you think too. But it sounds like he thought that he could just get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
Then, when people started being like, "This isn't okay. Like, all of this is multiple people's property. This is a huge piece of land. You can't just take all of our property and not tell us anything." So then he's all thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna put it back. You know, I didn't mean to. Here you go." But in hopes that they're gonna be like, "Well, this is the Lord's property, so we're gonna give it back to you."
He wasn't a willing participant in putting it back until the demand was made. He got some pushback, and the family basically said, before it was in one person's name, and you had 7 different houses out there, and they're getting loans on this property. You're going to mess up 7 lives, and so that's when the demand was made. Okay, you need to put 7 different deeds on these people's names, and then put the remainder in her name, and then give the people the choice. So some of it might get reconsecrated and some of it might not.
I guess in my brain I'm like, because Daniel's over there running around trying to get permits and stuff.
Building permits, yeah.
Did they just think that no one was going to say anything? No one on that property was going to care?
Most of the time they don't. I mean, you don't question authority, and Daniel was high up on the rung, and so, he's out there poking around for building permits, and most people wouldn't have questioned anything. They kind of had to because there's 7 houses out there. They were on the green belt. If Daniel would have built even one more house, they would have lost that green belt status, the tax status, and it would have made property taxes spike. So him trying to build even one house out there put it all in jeopardy. So that's why they had some pushback. So
in Daniel and Paul's perfect world in their brain, they were going to go get this done and then push them off the property? Push the families that were living there?
No one knows. No matter what we don't know, we do know that they took her name off of that property without her knowledge and put it in a trusted member's name that was married to one of the authorities. And that in itself is shady.
That's ridiculous. And she wouldn't have known, too. She had no idea until Daniel's poking around and there's other stuff going on.
Well, yeah, and had she died not knowing, that would have been a real problem for those 7 people living out there, because now it's legally in someone else's name, and they have no recourse at all. So luckily they caught this before she died. Otherwise, this would have had a whole different outcome.
Yeah, that is scary. And maybe that was their plan. We don't know.
Yeah.
So then what happens? So they put their foot down. They want the properties back in their name. We talked about this in part 1, where it took kind of like, here's a meeting, here it was like Paul was drawing things out, dragging his feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then
they think his thinking was, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do what they want, so it looks like I'm the good guy, and then they're going to consecrate it back to me anyway. At least most of them will. And then I'll come out smelling like roses,
But when they didn't, how long after was he waiting for them to come do that, and they didn't?
Well, and that's the thing that we talked about in part 1. By this time, that we've had, there's been several meetings, and people started seeing Paul differently than they ever had before. And they're like, I'm not sure I can trust this guy, so I don't know if I want to consecrate, my property. And so then it kind of backfired on him. He was kind of thinking they were, a bunch of them were going to consecrate it, and they might separate property or family members or whatever. Well, then the majority of them started whispering amongst themselves and saying, yeah, that was shady how he did that in the first place. What's to stop him from doing it to me again? I don't want to consecrate this.
Put a question in there, because from hearing all this, I'm like, why was this property such a big deal for them to sue and all this? When I feel like the orders got a lot of money, why did they focus so much on this? Do you know why?
It was a big piece of property.
It was 40 acres at one time, and so in 1990, this thing was worth $3 or $4 million.
Whoa.
Well, that's a big chunk of money.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it was worth fighting for.
They're all about money.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess my question is now, so Paul goes and puts it back, and he's just assuming that they're going to come to their senses and consecrate it because it's the Lord's work. And then when they don't do it, he actually did, what did he get? One of the lawyers, the attorneys in the order to put paperwork together to sue each and every person?
Well, yeah, then he decided, okay, I'm gonna have to take legal recourse to get it back because they didn't voluntarily get it back. And so I personally think it was a huge bluff, because legally he had no recourse. But he bluffed his way all the way to court, like an intimidation to scare them into consecrating, giving it back. And you know, you have the Lord lingering over you the whole time too. You know, do what's right. The Lord, this is the Lord's work. And so I think he was banking on that, and by then, like I say, the family kind of saw his true colors, and so they were like, yeah, we, and by then, you know, the family had hired a legit attorney, and the attorney's like, this is an open shut case, like you're gonna win. So then the family's like, okay, fine. So they just, you know, Paul sued him. Paul sued the family to try to get it back.
Did anyone ever in this process give their stuff willingly back, or was on Paul's side that had the properties, or was everyone kind of like, what is wrong with him?
Yeah, that's where it could have been really bad, because you had a husband on the north that was a devout member, and he wanted to give it back, but his wife didn't. You had another one on the south that was reversed. Down there, you had a wife that wanted to give it back, but the husband didn't. And they were all related, and so then, you know, they're having meetings of their own, and it was kind of like a cancer, and this thing started festering, and then pretty soon they're pointing out facts. Well, what about this? What about that? And it started turning people's opinions. And in the end, it was really the one guy in the north that was still wanted to do it, and he was refused. Paul said, "You're part of the package. So if they're gonna go, you're gonna go." And he probably didn't want it. He wanted to get rid of that whole swath of people all at once, because you leave one of them in there, then that can become a cancer and affect other people.
Well, they'll probably start talking about what happened, and it makes him look really bad.
Mm-hmm.
He did actually put the paperwork together, threatened to sue, but he didn't actually go into the courthouse because he knew that he couldn't.
Well, that's the funny part of the story. He's suing them, and he goes all the way to court, the day of court, and he knows he's going to lose. The Cottonwood People's attorney knows they're going to win. Well, right on the courthouse steps, he makes a phone call to his third wife, and he basically says, "Fold up the tents." Well, if he got in that courtroom and everything was exposed, and notaries on forged documents and all this different things, he was going to be in a lot worse trouble, and he knew it. So he was bluffing all the way up to there, hoping that the family would turn it back, and they didn't. Once it got to court, he was like, okay, call it off. And so then that made to where he had to pay the Cottonwood attorney fees, all that. So he paid a bunch of money. He not only paid his own attorney fees, but he paid all the Cottonwood attorney fees too, because it shouldn't have been there in the first place. You made these guys go get attorneys to defend themselves, which accrued a bunch of bills that they shouldn't have. And so the courts made him pay it for forfeiting.
That's what. Oh, okay. So if you forfeit, and basically do what he did, bluff all the way up to the courthouse, because he was hoping that they would just be like, oh, too afraid, and give him.
Yeah.
Luckily, they were smart enough to get their own advice from their own attorney and be like, wait a minute, he can't do this.
Yeah.
But I think in general, he does get away with that.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, people in order have no idea what the laws are, so they're like, oh, he probably does have standing on it. Like, even me, I was like, these 10% forms will probably hold up in court, even though I was signing them at 15.
Yeah. That's why this is such a landmark case, because this happened before that, and it's happened many times after that. But this case is what made them decide to make these legal forms, because, okay, we've been taking people's houses for years, but these guys finally fought back, so we got to make to where the people in the future can't do this. So now we're going to have you sign once a year.
It's taking advantage of your own followers these people were already so loyal, but it's like he just gets so greedy, and maybe it is he just has this habit of being able to get whatever he wants, and so when he doesn't get it, he's like, what is going on? So I'm gonna bluff, I'm gonna get my notaries, I'm gonna do what I have to do to get what I want, and then at the end of the day, I'm glad he didn't get it. I'm glad he had to pay the attorney fees. Do you know how much the attorney fees were?
Yeah, right to the penny.
Really?
$138,000.
Wow.
Just in the Cottonwood attorney fees. Now, I don't know what he paid his attorney fees, but if you think about that, if you're an order member, a devout order member, that kind of pisses you off, because they got nothing out of that. They spent probably close to $200,000. And back in 1990, houses were like 50, 60 grand. A real nice house is 150, 200 grand. He spent that in attorney fees and got nothing. And so it's kind of like paying taxes, and then you find out your taxes are getting blown in the wrong direction. That whole bluff cost who knows how many, how much money, and he ended up getting nothing. He lost.
Makes you wonder how many times he's done that. And it's not coming out of his pocket.
No.
Order money. That was my money.
On his behalf, I probably should say he kind of has to do what he does. Because if the order members sit and see these guys take their property and they got away with it, then they want to get away. Now this guy wants his house and that lady wants her house, So he kind of had to do the legal thing, and then just he still sprinkles religion on top of it or whatever. But
yeah, because if one person gets away with it, then other people will get ideas for sure. Because how come no one's talked about it? Because there was multiple people involved in it, but there's everyone's so hush hush about this story.
People that are in the order, they don't question authority, and so these 10% forms and inventory forms and things that are now a legal thing that they come around once a year and get you to sign over, I don't think they link it to that case. They just think there's a new rule in the order, because this happens all throughout history. New things are added. ABC order standards are added. They didn't used to be there. This, whatever. And so they just adopted another rule, and I don't think they link it to any particular case. They just think, oh, okay, we're signing things now. So they just sign things. They don't get a copy. They don't even half the time don't even know what they signed because they didn't bother to read it. They just trust authority. Authority's asking me to sign this. They sign it.
So I heard that there was actually a piece of paper that these people that were on the Commonwealth property had to sign to basically say that they're not going to hurt the order. I don't even know what the paper was actually.
Yeah, it's kind of a settlement agreement between the two parties. Basically, I mean, it's a huge, it's like 55 pages long, and each person involved named in the case had to sign this agreement, and it's basically both parties agreeing, going forward, you will not harm each other. And so we're going to settle this case. You guys win. He has to pay your attorney fees, blah, blah, blah. But part of the agreement is you guys will play nice in the sandbox from now on together.
Meaning they can't ever tell their story?
Well, I mean, anything that could harm the order in any way, slander, libel, whatever, they can't even help someone else hurt the order because that was part of their agreement. Now, it works both ways. The order signed the same thing. They can't harm the Browns either, but it's part of the agreement that, okay, you guys have to play nice from now on. This is a national stat. I don't know that it's changed, but only 4% of cases ever go before a judge and jury. 4%, which means 96% doesn't. Now, this is partly why courts do this, because they don't want their dockets overloaded with nonsense. So when we finally get before a judge and this case happens, they're like, okay, we're going to settle this case, but you guys need to play nice from now on, because we don't want you to keep suing each other year after year and clogging up the court system. So we're going to go ahead and settle this case. You win, you lose, and you're both going to sign this thing to play nice from now on. And now we'll never have to deal with you guys again.
So I guess in my brain I was like, did Paul make them sign it? But he also had to sign it.
He also had to sign it. Everybody in the case had to sign it.
Okay, so does that also mean that there could never be a lawsuit between the two of them again?
Technically, no. I mean, unless there is wording in there to where if one of them, I'm gonna use the word rogue. If one of either of the parties ever go rogue and cause the other harm, then yeah, litigation can be brought against them because they went rogue. And that's understandable, because you can't. I mean, sometimes you're gonna there's somebody that just goes rogue and you can't control it. I mean, their side couldn't control it, the Cottonwood side couldn't control it, and if that happens, then yeah, Paul could go ahead and sue one of them. In fact, this case actually led to, when this case ended, Paul had to basically write checks for everybody's bank accounts because he kicked everybody out. After he sued him and lost, he was pretty pissed. So he had to sign checks to, clear out everybody's bank accounts. Well, there's a couple people out in Cottonwood, when they got their checks, they were way off, like to the tune of thousands of dollars. And so those people went ahead and sued Paul in a different case a year or two later trying to get their money, the money that was rightfully theirs. And they had statements to prove it. And so it's like, you know, even when he was settled, he was kind of pissed that he lost this case. So when he settled, he ripped them off on their way out the door. You know?
So basically, he broke the clause anyways. He broke the rules.
Well, kinda, but he, you know, in that case, he could say, well, this is what we show. We show you have this amount of dollars, and I'm not trying to harm you. I wrote you a check for what I show you have. Well, she's showing she has this. So that turned into a different case.
He could just play dumb, like I was trying to do the right thing. I guess that was one of my last questions. Is I guess that means that because they all were so involved in the order. Because when you're an order member, you can't just like that's a pastime. You do that on the weekend. No, you have your job there. You have your money there. You have your family there. So did they all get like fired from their order jobs? Like did they all?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty rapid. This happened the end of December, and then you had New Year's meetings, and some of the Cottonwood people went to that New Year's meeting, even though they were technically not members, and most of the order didn't even know this happened. They were sitting in the crowd, and nobody even, I mean, it didn't even know what happened. This all happened behind closed doors, and I think Paul wanted to keep it that way because he doesn't want this kind of stuff advertised because, like I said before, that makes other people think about taking their own property back, you know?
I guess I'm wondering how, like, it must have just gradually, like, he gives them the checks for their things. They don't come to church as much, or because did he say you're not allowed to come to church?
Well, this is the funny part. He mentions, if your daughters still want to come to the functions, the order functions, they're welcome to. You know, I mean, what do you need? What does a polygamous culture need more of?
Women.
Daughters. So, even though they were kicking out the family, your daughters are still welcome.
So annoying.
Now, one thing I better mention here is Paul tells the flock, his order members, that the Cottonwood people sued him. Now, that's like a half-truth, because Paul actually sued the Cottonwood people first. And when he closed out their accounts, only three members sued him back. But that was a totally separate case. So in a way, he's telling the truth, because 3 members of the Cottonwood people sued him to get their money back. But he's not even mentioning the whole lawsuit before that led to their lawsuit. He sued them, is what started it.
Right. And he's framing it as like he's the victim here, and these people that are suing is just trying to hurt the order, blah blah blah. But he forgets to mention why they're suing, and what even led up to that.
Yeah.
I guess that's it, right? That's the story of the entire Cottonwood case.
I think so.
There's always going to be like truths to some of the things, right? Just like that. Like, yeah, they did sue, but you really should question. Like, that is one thing that ever since I started my channel, I'm like, just question. If I could get all the order members watching to listen to something I'm saying, question everything, find out the truth. If you, like, what is that verse even? It's even in the Bible, seek and ye shall find, ask and ye shall receive.
Mm-hmm.
Just do your research and you'll figure it out. But at the end of the day, it's like, people think that we're out here trying to hurt the order, but the reality is we're just trying to tell the truth. It's not our fault that the truth makes Paul look bad.
Yeah. And one thing I would like to mention too, and this goes back in the earlier days, or you used to have a guy that would be assigned to run say this farm over here. Well, they would take the cost of that farm and the cost of equipment, tractors, etc., to run this farm, and they would come up with a number. And that guy would start out day one with this much debt. Well, now they charged him interest on that debt. And so this guy would break his body up farming year after year, trying to make that thing profitable. But he started out upside down to begin with, and he's fighting against principal and interest. And the debt usually grows because of the interest. And so you'll spend years down there, and your debt will be in the millions of dollars. And so that's why I think this number 7 on the Articles of Incorporation, a private party of the members of the incorporation shall not be liable for the debts or operations of this corporation, and the corporation shall not be liable for the personal debts of its members. It clearly draws a separation between your personal ownings, anything of yours, your property, your inventory, whatever, and if you're the person running John's Market. There's a separation there. John's Market debt or profits should not affect your house or your car or your inventory. And the order a lot of times would build up this debt and then just take everything you have, all your personal stuff, because you were running this ranch. That was an order ranch. It wasn't that guy's personal ranch. It was, and they just bundled it all together, and then, you oftentimes die with this huge debt. In this case, was reversed. This case was a huge surplus, $3 or $4 million surplus. And for some reason, you can't inherit a surplus, but you can always inherit a debt.
And that's what doesn't make any sense at all. I remember having this argument with one of Paul's daughters about, she's like, well, why would you want to get a handout from your grandpa? Because my grandpa, all his money went to the order. And she's like, well, why would you want to get a handout? I don't want to get a handout. I'm like, well, too bad you're getting one because you're Paul's. Like, it just, to me, it never made sense. But the thing is, like, if you're in it and you're surrounded by it, like, you don't think to question it because everyone around you is not doing that.
Right.
And I remember being in it thinking, I feel crazy because I'm the only one asking these questions.
Yeah.
There are some people that do, they just don't ask it out loud.
Yeah.
They're too afraid because of, like, the society around them is going to push them down if they find out that they're questioning.
Yeah.
What you're just saying, like, that doesn't make any sense. Why did they start to change it? Was it when Ortel came in power and was like, let's switch things up? Because in the beginning, it wasn't a religion.
No, it wasn't. No, it was a cooperative. And I don't know if you want an explanation on that versus a religion, but yeah, it didn't become a religion until in the 70s. And that was during Ortel's time. And then, that's when they got their tax exemption status. But then, yeah, over the years, the rules started changing. And then this property was taken out of her name in 86.
Until the 70s?
Yeah.
What about they always say, the whole 1935 or whatever.
1940 meeting?
But no, don't they say the order started in 1935?
Yeah, it wasn't a church.
You know that.
What about on January 1st when they all went inside a bathtub and baptized each other?
1940 meeting.
That's the 1940 meeting?
It was a 1940 meeting too, and that's when things changed during Brother Eldon's time. It's Articles of Incorporation that came out in 1941. When the order started in 1935, it was not a religion. You had 2 or 3 Catholics, you had 1 Lutheran, you had most of the Mormons because that's what came across the plains. And most of the people in Utah Territory were Mormons. It wasn't even a state yet when they came over here. And there's a lot of churchy overtones to it, at consecration, etc. But it was never a church. And he even says, and it says it in the Articles of Incorporation, you can be an atheist and be a member of the Davis County Cooperative.
Wow.
And you know that when Eldon was giving numbers, it was originally just who became a member. So, okay, you're the second member, so you're number 2. You're the third member, so you're number 3. And then it just, over time, became about religion. And this is just my opinion, I think it's because they realized how they could control easier with the idea of manipulation that in the afterlife, you'll get everything. So give me everything, and then you'll have everything when you die.
Mm-hmm.
But I get it now on Earth.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, because that's going to blow a lot of people's minds, because I always associated 1935 with the story that they tell when Brother Eldon, they filled the bathtub and they did the baptisms. And remember, because they always say January 1st of 1935. Well, at least that's what I was told. 1935 is when it started. I don't know if they said these baptisms happened in 1935, but I always associated these baptisms happened at the start of the order, and that's what started it.
You bring up a good point. Let me hit on this before I forget, but there were no baptisms, no taking of the sacrament, no garments. This was not a religion. That never happened in Brother Eldon's time. They did not do baptisms. They didn't take the sacrament. It was not a church. It was a cooperative. Now, he was still a Mormon. He would still go to the Mormon church and do those things because he was a Mormon. But this cooperative was more set up because of the Depression and pooling things, and it was a cooperative.
It's confusing because you hear the stories that he got the keys from the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So does that not mean it's a religion?
We used to hear he never made any claims, and so he never said he had the keys. In fact, the Teton trip was him trying to get the keys. Going up and hiking in the Bountiful Mountains was him trying to get the keys. He started this cooperative. He was a very religious guy. He was trying to get the keys. Lots of people thought he was the man on the watchtower. Some people even thought he was the second coming of Christ. But he never stood at the podium and said any of those things. So some people might have believed whatever they might have believed.
And I even could see that maybe after his death, it was easier for people to tell it in their own way and make it sound more like that, you know? Like that all just happened at one time. When really, it makes so much sense now that it's all just being implemented over the years because the sacrament just started in 2014, like very recent. And they'd never done it before then, so.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, originally it was just a society, right? DCC society. It was just a group of people getting together. And then did you say when the first baptisms were?
Not until probably in the 80s, I want to say. I think. Maybe it might have been a little bit earlier than that.
But at least no than the 70s then, huh?
Not that I know of. In fact, when they adopted the name, the Latter-day Church of Christ, and registered it with the state, I want to say it was 1977. That's when it became a religion.
What was the point of the 1940 meeting then?
I'm going to put it in a modern day example. You have 2 jet skis. You have 2 four-wheelers. I have 2 snowmobiles. We agree amongst ourselves, okay, let's make some rules. And here are the rules. You insure your own toys, and we all agree to bring them back fully fueled up. Now, I only had to buy 2 snowmobiles, so I'm only out 10 grand. You're out 10 grand, you're out 10 grand. But I get to use, on the weekends, I get to use your toys, my toys. You can use all the different seasons of our toys. But I only own the snowmobiles. That was the theory behind the Davis County Cooperative. But they were trying to survive. So they weren't having fun. You had a tractor. You had some mules. I had a milk cow. Let's pool our stuff and all of us try and survive. That was a cooperative, not a church. They still went to church on Sunday, wherever they practiced. They still went to church, but the cooperative. And that's why when he incorporated in 1941, the government came and said, hey, we're going to offer 10 grand to all corporations, not just him, and he turned it down. It was a corporation, not a church. They're not going to give a church 10 grand. They're going to give the corporation 10 grand.
Wait. Did you say that backwards? What do you mean? Why would they give a corporation 10 grand?
1/3 of the company was out of work, unemployed. And so they went around, they had these, I can't remember what they're called, they had a 3-letter abbreviation. They had set up like buildings where you could go in there and try and get work. Well, these corporations, the way it reads out in the corporation is they're trying to help each other out. So it's today's equivalent of a stimulus package. We're going to give you guys 10 grand to help out a whole swath of people.
If they technically weren't a religion, if they were just considered a corporation or cooperative, why would they not take it?
Well, and this is a huge difference between Eldon and Ortel. Eldon's theory was, I think it's twofold. First of all, if you read the Articles of Incorporation, it says we are self-sustaining. We're not going to get on welfare. We're not going to have any government handouts of any kind. We're not doing it. And secondly, and he didn't say this, but I think he also didn't want the government sitting and watching him. If the government gives you 10 grand, the government wants to know what you're doing with that 10 grand. He didn't want the government, just meddle out. Leave us alone. We're not taking your money. Leave us alone. We got this. So he didn't take it. Probably hundreds of other corporations all across the country did take it. I mean, you're talking 1941. Nobody had any money, and the government's offering you 10 grand. I think I would have took it. He didn't.
Isn't that so funny though? It's like he's like, we don't want help from the government, and then Ortel comes around like, everybody get extra Social Security cards so get as much food stamps as possible.
Polar opposites, those two brothers. There's a 10-year gap between them. Polar opposites in almost every aspect. Eldon gave out numbers to 2 dark-complected men with the wrong kind of blood, according to his own doctrine.
Was it Italian bloodline?
Yeah, Italian bloodline. And then a full-blown Indian, Native American Indian, was number 10 before Merlin got it. You get to J.O. Ortel, that all changed. You get to Paul, it's even changed further. So it evolves over time. But what the order was, what the Davis County Cooperative was back then is nothing at all what you see today.
And it's crazy to think of because it's only been 3 leaderships, and how much has it changed? And it sometimes gets me scared Well, it's already corrupt, but like you look at Warren Jeff's church and how corrupt they got, and they're getting even worse and worse and worse. It scares me to see that we're probably going down that path.
Nowadays, a number is a status symbol. It's a loyalty thing. Like these guys will try and get this number, and if they get a number, it makes them so devoted. It's like a religious thing. Everything was so different back then.
I feel like it's even, I mean, I don't know if you feel this way, but people brag about their number being like a lower number. Like, oh, well,
Like it's cooler, kind of?
Yeah, I don't know why. But
Yeah, in fact, when Paul first took office, number 9 was vacant because Franson had left. Cecil Franson had number 9. Well, he had left, and so it hadn't been reassigned, and it was vacant. Well, Paul was the next leader, so he just assigned himself. Because it was the closest number to number 1 was number 9. And that's how he got number 9. It wasn't like there was some kind of ceremony and he just took it because I'm the next leader, I'm going to take the lowest number. And then he gave the next lowest numbers to his brothers.
Which I think is interesting because Dad got 36, which means he got his number before Jesse got 40. What is his number, 48?
Yeah. Even though Jesse, why would that be significant?
Because
just because Jesse the closely related to Paul then?
Yeah, I always thought it was interesting that how they must have had some way that they were giving numbers out because it was also before Dad was living polygamy. I always thought you couldn't get a number unless you were living polygamy. I thought there was all these rules because it was like your ticket to heaven, so you have to check all the boxes or whatever.
But your dad's probably, I mean, I'd have to do the timeline on him, but your dad's probably 5 years older than Jesse too. So Jesse might have been quite young and your dad was older, so he got a number before Jesse, I don't know.
Yeah, it's got to be something to do with age or something. I don't know. Obviously, it's different now.
It could literally just be towards favoritism, though, because Paul was just giving to whoever he wanted. And so maybe he was that day liking Burl more.
Well, that was the full story. Then it ended in a settlement agreement. And, I mean, I guess that's partially why you never really hear this story, too, is because they're technically kind of not allowed to talk about it. And that's the sad thing, is like you're not allowed to hurt each other, but telling the truth is hurting them, which is like, I don't know, I hate that idea that telling the truth is hurting them and now you can't tell the truth.
Well,
I can't imagine that they would be forced not to just talk about the settlement, because that's legal documentation that happened, right? Wouldn't they be able to?
Yeah, but they don't want to, I mean, it's just like Elaine Jenkins had a similar case. Well, there's 2 cases where the members of the order won against the order. You don't want to advertise that and let the other members, and so they try to keep that stuff quiet for a reason, because you don't want that advertised, because then somebody else might get ballsy and try to take their own house too,
Yeah, so the people who signed it, it's kind of like a signature saying we're not going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what's hard, though. It's like it's also their story, so they should be allowed to talk about it. Paul has been known, though, to in court have people sign so that you don't talk about what happened, because then, for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it's kind of like an NDA. Like, you need to sign this. I need to know that you're, what you know and what you just heard here that you're not going to say anything about,
Dang, I can't think of the name, but like when you invent something, you can get something to claim that it's only yours. But let's say you're working with someone to invent that thing, and then they go and invent it.
Yeah, that makes sense, but not like, hey, I slapped you, now sign this piece of paper.
So you can't tell people.
Well, yeah, about me slapping
you. Yeah.
No sense at all.
This was the full story, and thank you for watching, and thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is really interesting. I had lots of questions about it.
We didn't even announce that you were in the background. We'll have to make an announcement in the beginning. Say
hey guys.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I didn't have a really good outro for it, but I guess I'll just say, let me know if there's anything that you want clarified. Let me know if this opens up to more questionings for more videos that you would like me to do on, 10% form, inventory form, order history, the 1940 meeting, how the order became a religion. Let me know if you guys have any questions on this history, and I will see you guys on Cold a Cup of Coffee on Sunday. Bye!